Hey, it's me. Welcome to, I think this is 16 or 17. I should really write these down. But welcome to this week's video. I'm in the same park I was in last week, the Grun, that gorge, the valley that cuts through the city of Luxembourg. By the way, I apologize for the sound on that video. I was right next to a small waterfall, and the noise was so kind of loud, I tried to mess with the audio, and it kind of flattened my voice. So I'm a little bit further. You will be hearing background noise here because the park is full of people, which is cool. It's nice to see everyone out, especially with all of the COVID confinement stuff happening. Luxembourg Luxembourg is, I guess the minister is doing an announcement on Sunday. They might kind of lock stuff down a little bit again here, unfortunately, because the cases have risen a whole lot here. We don't know what it's going to be like yet. I'm really hoping they don't close the gyms. I know that's a little selfish of me, but I'm just back from the gym again, and I feel pretty amazing. Sometime, maybe in a different video, I'll talk a little bit more about about going to the gym. I was never really a gym person, and then about 2 years ago, I got this huge kind of screaming push from Odin, of all people, gods, what have you. And it's like, you need to go to the gym. So I started. But I'll talk about that another time. You see that cool bridge behind me? Yeah. So it looks like an ancient Roman aqueduct or viaduct. It's not. It was built, I think, about 200 years ago. But of course, it's done in the same style. It's an arch. There's nothing holding it up in the middle except for the pressure on both sides. I don't know if yeah, most of you probably know this, but I like to never assume people know things. So, because I like when I don't know something and someone tells me. So, for those of you who don't know how an arch works, they're really cool. Basically, you've got like two sides going, right? And because of the curve, because it's kind of a part circle, the pressure, you would think like one side and the other they're just going to collapse. But at the top, you have this thing called a capstone. And the capstone makes it so that all of the pressure going this way, it's like it wants to go down, but it also wants to go this way. And then all of the pressure going this way and also wants to go down, they hit in the middle. And that capstone keeps the whole thing from falling. Pretty brilliant, and the Romans didn't come up with it. The Romans adapted it, and probably are the ancient culture who's most known for using arches everywhere. But it was the Greeks, as far as we know. It could have been even further, who kind of discovered that idea. And it's really interesting to think that something. It was 2,000 years ago when they were really building arches everywhere throughout Europe for the viaducts. We tend to think that we're like super modern and like we are like the height of technology, but we forget all of these societies before had this technology too, and different kinds. The whole thing with the pyramids. There's always the like, oh, how did they build them? Like it would cost us so much to do that and be crazy engineering. There's a couple of really interesting ideas on how they do it, and it's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. It's just not something that we would really think about right now. Another example of that is I just forgot I was going to say something about it. But there's all of these old ancient. Oh, I'm sorry, Newgrange and Stonehenge and all of these other places that are aligned to solar events, to solstices. Those are 5,000, 6,000 years old. Newgrange is 6,000 years old. So 6,000 years ago, you had you had the knowledge of like, okay, this is where the sun is going to be every year, and this is the angle that it's going to come up at, and this is how you build a monument that will last for 6,000 years. Maybe they didn't think about it lasting that long, but they built pretty solidly. Where there's a little box window, a little window, where like when the sun rises for 3 days on the winter solstice in Newgrange, for a few minutes, the light goes through this window and illuminates the entire tomb inside. I got to be there. It's amazing. It's quite an experience. And after 6,000 years, the light has narrowed a bit because the whole structure is sunk, because it's stone, and stone after 6,000 years will eventually kind of settle. Stonehenge is like that as well, aligned to all of these things. Like all of these cultures were doing these magnificent things that we don't even think about. There's kind of a joke that goes around, a little meme thing that says just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean it's aliens, which is pretty funny because there's a popular television show in the United States called like Ancient Aliens or something like that, where pretty much any crazy awesome technology that most people wouldn't think our ancestors knew how to do is then explained as, well, aliens came, or I think it's called alien astronaut theory or something like that. It's absurd. But what's funny is 500 years ago there weren't even white people. White was not a category. You had the people who are the ancestors of the Europeans now doing the exact same thing that you saw the ancestors of people who are Africans now doing, and also in Asia and everywhere else. So the meme is not exact, but still it's a good point that the explanations that people come up with for these things are a lot more complicated than they need to be. You don't have to interject fantasy. All you have to do is recognize that there have always been people. There's always been the possibility of people thinking deeply about the way the world works, paying attention to the stars. Have you guys seen the comet yet? Sorry, I got really excited. I haven't seen it yet because it's been pretty overcast the last few days. But there's this really awesome kind of observatory place near where I live with my man now. We're gonna try to go up to it. And in North America, I know you can see it at sunset or after sunset, but in Europe, we have to see it right before sunrise. So we're not gonna wake up early. We're gonna stay up all night. That's the best way to do it. So we're gonna try to see the comet. But what is the thing? Oh yeah, if you think back, even 500 years without, before capitalism, the night sky, the stars, were always super present. Anywhere you went, except for when it was overcast, you looked out and there was this sea of stars above you. If you live in a modern city now, you don't see it so much. And even if you don't live in the city, but you live outside of it in the suburbs, you're not going to be able to see as much of it because of all of the light that blocks out the starlight. Pretty lucky where I live. There's not so much light, and what's interesting, there are street lamps, but they cover the top so that the light only goes down on the street, which is where you need it if you're driving. You don't need it going up. But I remember in America, those big highway lights just illuminate everything, and so you can't see, and the light shines up, and it's so sad. Anyway, so stars. And I definitely need to see that comet. But stars were, and still are in many cultures, something hyper present to everyone. It was, the equivalent of seeing the same tree every day, and that tree would be important too because that was part of your thing. And you didn't have screens that were always distracting you from that, And now we play video games at like Skyrim and all of those things where they're big natural landscapes, and could see crazy mountains and stuff, but actually that you can just walk around Europe and see those things, or North America and see those things. But we kind of divorce ourselves from that real existence that's around us, and instead mediate it through images, through television, through media, films, and especially our iPhones. And I'm pretty guilty of this too. I spend way too much time on social media looking at what other people are saying about the world instead of going out and seeing the world myself. And before all of this, you had people who did that. That was a basic part of life. And you know, though you might not have known much about the stars, you would always see them. They were always this present thing. And then of course you had special, you know, groups of people, classes or castes or whatever, like the Druids in Celtic lands, whose job or whose role was to pay attention to the way those stars moved, to understand what it meant, how these specific cycles continued. Interestingly, it was a 19-year process, I believe, to train as a druid before. And part of the reason why it was 19 years is because that's linked to, I can't remember, Sirius, I think, is the star, where it does this specific cycle every 19 years. And so 19 was this kind of sacred number. And it was, okay, you know, your training is this long, because that's how long it takes this star to go from where it is now to that same place again. And they knew that, and they paid attention to that. That was important knowledge to them, not, you know, what are the Kardashians doing, or, you know, how do I retweet something on Twitter? Like, you know, the knowledge that that is important to us now would have been completely irrelevant to them, and that's how they were able to build things like that. And we lost that. Of course, we still have, you know, classes of people, or, you know, professions where people pay attention to that. Engineers, architects, you know, those sorts of people. You know, they give attention to that. That's their role. But they're only important to our society in that they build the things we use, as opposed to also being kind of considered sage, wise people who, you know, can tell us about everything else. Sorry, some really weird thing fell on me. Very bizarre. Anyway, it wasn't from the bridge. It was weird. I think it's pollen. Sorry, I won't show you. Anyway, sorry. I think it's mustard. Some fucking full mustard at me. No, that's ridiculous. Probably a better explanation. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about this week. I mean, there was like another thing I wanted to talk about too, you know, about this bridge. Maybe, yeah, I'll just go ahead and talk about it. So, let me show you. So, there's more of that bridge. And it goes over there. And that place where I'm showing you right there. See that corner kind of by the tree? Let me see if I can put the tripod down without it falling. So, right there is where, I don't like walking across that bridge. You know, it's beautiful underneath. It's really wild. But I don't like walking across it. And I don't like walking across it because of that one spot. Every time I walk across it, when I'm right at that place, I'm like, oh, I should jump. Now, I'm not a suicidal person. I'm not suicidal. But every time I walk by that spot, I'm like, oh, jump. No. You know, it's funny, it's not even in the middle. It's kind of on the edge. Interestingly, people do jump, and they jump from that spot. In fact, it just happened, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, where someone from that exact same spot jumped to their death. You know, you're not falling in water, you're falling on rock. Awful death. And it's interesting because this is not the only bridge I've ever seen this on. There's a bridge in the city of Arles in France, in southern France, where my friend Ali and I, we We were on vacation, pilgrimage actually. And we were staying in Arles for a few days, and every single time we walked across this bridge, I was like, Ali, I don't want to walk across this bridge. And it was the only way to get from one side of the city to another, because we were crossing, what was that river? The Rhone? I think it was the Rhone. It wasn't the Loire. Yeah, it was the Rhone. So every time we were crossing the river, there's this point where it was like, I want to jump, you know. And I asked her, and she's pretty sensitive about those things too. She's like, yeah, I feel it right there, you know. And it's nice. As soon as we kind of identified it, it was a little bit easier for me to cross. But every time, like, I got as close as I could to the center of the bridge, you know, and there's traffic coming, but I was like, I'd rather get hit by a car than be on the edge of this bridge, because it wants me to jump. And interesting, like in that situation, we ended up finding out. We did like a little kind of, you know, history search. That bridge, the bridge had been like partially destroyed during the Nazi occupation. They held the bridge, and then the resistance fighters, you know, were starting to take over. So what the Nazis started to do was to blow the bridge up. That's kind of a very common tactic in wars since forever. The Romans did that. People did that to the Romans, etc. You know, that's not a Nazi thing. And there's all these people kind of walking by, looking at me, and it's really cute. I should tell them to wave, but I'd have to turn the camera. Anyway, so so they were gonna blow up the bridge, and then there was this big fight. You know, where hundreds of them died, like, and their bodies were all thrown into the river. And it's interesting, bodies were all thrown into the river right at that spot where I always wanted to jump. I got a theory on why that happens. And, you know, I mean, it's interesting. There's always like the idea of trolls being on bridges who, if you did not pay a certain, you know, price or answer a riddle or whatever, like, you know, they wouldn't let you pass. And I think there's a thing about bridges and like a spirit of bridges. And that spirit of bridges seems to be kind of related to dead people. Once someone has died underneath a bridge, it kind of gets stronger, and it kind of like pulls other people on there. I mean, I've heard that it's the same thing with like the Golden Gate Bridge for a while, and they kind of like tried to, you know, block it off. And they had to block off the Brooklyn Bridge for the same reason. You know, there's like the spirit of the bridge. It's like, yeah, you know, give me something. Give me life. Give me death. Not the spirits and gods and all of that, like, they operate on completely different morality. That sounds like a really awful thing for a bridge spirit to do, right? That's a bridge spirit. So that kind of makes sense. And the best thing is, you know, I've found to just sort of acknowledge, oh, hey, you're here. Yeah, you want me to jump? I'm not gonna jump. Sorry. You know, I think it's a little bit like that, but I don't know. Anyway, so it's starting to rain, and I still haven't figured out. Oh, it's pollen. It's yellow. It totally looks like mustard, but it doesn't smell like. Anyway, sorry. I literally don't know what fell on me. It's great. It's not bird shit. No, definitely not. Anyway, I love you all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you as always for your support. I deeply appreciate it, and I love making these videos for you folks. So, yeah, I'll see you next week.